She believed she was the only Deathworlder, until a human proved her wrong. The hull cracked open before anyone had time to scream. Zara pressed herself flat against the inner wall of the cargo bay, one hand gripping a steel pipe that had broken loose from its weld, the other clutching the emergency beacon she had never once believed she would need. Outside the breach, the gas clouds of Velm 4 churned like a living thing, violet and gold, and absolutely lethal. The pressure differential was already pulling loose items toward the gap. A supply crate skidded across the floor and disappeared into nothing. She was the only survivor in this section. She had checked twice. Zara was a Krethali, a species that had evolved in the killing fields of Duroth, a planet so hostile that every creature on it was either predator, armor, or dead. Her hide was dense enough to stop low-caliber rounds. Her bones had tensile strength that made most surgical tools useless. Her lungs could filter particulate air for up to 12 minutes without external support. She had survived Duroth's acid rains, its megafauna, its seasonal electromagnetic storms that fried unshielded electronics and left weaker animals twitching on the ground. She was, by every metric the Galactic Union used to classify species, a Deathworlder, the only one aboard the freighter Solace Run. She had always taken a quiet pride in that. Not arrogance, she was not arrogant, just awareness. When the crew had looked to her during meteor shower detours or hull stress alerts, she had responded with calm competence. She was built for this. Others were not. But right now, with the ship dying around her and the beacon in her hand blinking a steady red, she was honest with herself. She was scared. Not of the breach, not of the gas clouds. She was scared because the rescue call she had sent out had been answered by a ship registered to a human crew. And she had seen humans up close exactly once before, on Vestra Station, where one had casually eaten something that had hospitalized a Gorathi diplomat for 9 days. The human had called it street food. The docking clamps hit the outer hull with a sound like a grenade. 3 figures came through the emergency connector tube at a speed that made no tactical sense. They moved fast, yes, but they also moved like they were annoyed rather than afraid. The one in front was tall, lean, and wearing a suit of mismatched repair armor that looked like it had been through a recycler 6 times. His helmet visor was cracked along the lower left. He had taped it, with actual tape. "You the only one alive in here," he called out, not yelling, just projecting his voice the way someone does when they have been in too many loud rooms. "Section C7 through C11 are lost," Zara said. "I am the only confirmed survivor in this section." "Name?" "Zara. Krethali, 3rd rank engineering officer." "I'm Cole," the man said, already moving, already assessing the breach with eyes that swept the room like he was reading a page. "That's Priya and that's Len." The 2 others, a woman and another man, both human, were already working. Priya had pulled a foam seal canister from her kit and was angling toward the breach. Len was running a scanner along the floor, tracking the stress fractures with practiced efficiency. "Is that tape on your visor?" Zara asked because she could not help it. Cole glanced at her. "Epoxy-reinforced polymer strip, holds pressure up to 8 atmospheres." He paused. "Yes, it is tape." Priya fired the foam seal in 3 short bursts, and the breach began to close. The violent pull of air died to a whisper, then stopped. Zara watched the woman work with something close to disbelief. She had moved within 2 meters of an active atmospheric breach with nothing more than a standard suit and a canister, bracing herself against the drag with what appeared to be sheer stubbornness. "You should not have approached the breach directly," Zara said. "The particulate concentration near the gap would have degraded your suit seals within 40 seconds. Priya glanced back at her with an expression Zara could not fully read. 43, actually. I was done in 31. Cole was already at the internal comm panel, pulling the cover off, rerouting power from the secondary bus. "Len, how bad is the spine?" 3 fracture points. The forward 2 are stable. The aft one is arguing with me. Len tapped the scanner against his palm, which seemed to help it, and then looked up at Zara. Do you know if this ship was carrying anything dense in the aft cargo stack? Mass distribution is off. Refined ore, Velm iron, approximately 900 standard units. Len let out a long breath through his nose. Of course it was. He looked at Cole. We need the heavy clamps. Already called them, Cole said, not looking up from the panel. Zara stood in the middle of the room, holding her beacon, watching three humans stabilize a situation that should have required a dedicated salvage team with heavy equipment and at least 2 qualified atmospheric engineers. They were doing it with kit bags, a cracked visor, and what appeared to be deeply casual confidence. How long have you been doing this? She asked. Cole sealed the comm panel and stood. Rescue work, about 11 years. Were you always this? She searched for the right word. Relaxed. He looked at her directly then, and she realized his eyes were lighter than she had expected, gray-green, with the particular steadiness of someone who had stopped being surprised by danger a long time ago. I grew up in a place called rural Idaho, he said. The first time I was in real danger, I was 8 years old, and it involved a broken irrigation pump, a flooded basement, and my grandfather's very strong opinions about not calling for help. He almost smiled. You learn to work with what you have. Idaho, Zara repeated. It's a region on Earth, mountains, cold, not much margin for error. He tilted his head. You are Krethali. Yes. Duroth evolved. Yes. He nodded slowly, with what looked like genuine respect. Then you know what it is to come from a place that does not care whether you live. She looked at him. I do. So do we, he said simply, and turned back to work. That was the moment. That small, plain sentence. It did not feel like a boast. It felt like recognition, the kind that passes between two creatures who have both stared down the same indifferent universe and decided, separately, to keep moving anyway. Zara set the beacon down on the floor. It was still blinking red. She picked up the broken pipe she had been holding when they arrived and said, Tell me where you need me. Cole pointed at the aft corridor without hesitation. Len's going to need a second set of hands on those fracture points, something strong enough to hold the structural brace in place while he seals it. I can do that, she said. I know, he said, and he said it without surprise, which was the part that stayed with her longest. She walked toward the aft corridor, and for the first time since the hull had cracked open, the fear was gone. Not replaced by confidence exactly, replaced by something more interesting, curiosity. She had spent years being the only Deathworlder in every room she entered. She was beginning to suspect she had been wrong about that for quite some time. The Solace run was not going to fly again. That much was clear within the first hour of working alongside the humans. The aft fracture had compromised the primary support spine, and when Zara pressed her palms flat against the brace and held it in place, held it against a force that would have buckled most mechanical jacks, she felt the full weight of the ship's structural failure pushing back through her arms. It was not comfortable. She did not say so. Len worked fast. He was the quietest of the three, deliberate in a way that reminded her of Krethali engineers back home, people who had learned that hesitation on Duroth cost you your life and speed without accuracy cost you the same. He sealed the first 2 fracture points with polymer compound and microweld adhesion in under 9 minutes. The third took longer because the crack had migrated. A secondary stress path had opened 2 centimeters above the primary line, invisible until the scanner caught it on the second pass. Hold position, Len told her, and she held. Her arms were burning, not from weakness but from sustained isometric effort at an angle that put maximum load on her secondary shoulder muscles. Krethali physiology was designed for short explosive force, not prolonged static resistance. She was aware of this. She continued holding. Len sealed the third fracture. The structural brace clicked into locked position. The sound it made, a clean, solid click, was one of the better sounds Zara had heard in recent memory. You can release, Len said. She released and shook out her hands. The burn faded quickly. How long? 4 minutes past your comfortable range if I had to guess. He looked at her without judgment. You should have said something. You needed the time. He looked at her for a moment longer, then nodded. Thank you. No fanfare, just acknowledgement. She found she liked that. Back in the main section, Priya had established a communications link with the Union Emergency Relay and was coordinating the next phase of extraction. Cole was on the floor of the bay, lying on his back under the secondary power conduit, doing something with his hands that involved a lot of precision, and from the sound of it, a great deal of controlled patience. What is he doing? Zara asked Len. Rerouting power around the damaged relay so we can run life support on auxiliary until the recovery tug arrives. Len paused. The conduit runs about 4 centimeters above his face. One wrong move and he gets hit with a feedback arc. That is extremely dangerous. He's done it before. Len set down his scanner and looked at her. Can I ask you something? Yes. Krathali physiology, your nervous system handles pain differently than most species, right? Higher threshold, faster adaptation. Yes. We process pain signals in a compressed cycle. What would register as sharp pain for most species becomes a dull background signal for us after the first few seconds. Len nodded slowly. That must have been useful a few minutes ago. It was, Zara admitted. Humans don't have that, he said. We just sort of get used to it. Culturally, I mean. Cole grew up in a region where cold was normal and hard work started early. Priya grew up sailing, which teaches you to manage discomfort before it becomes panic. I grew up on a research station in the Antarctic shelf zone. The base temperature was -30 before wind chill. Zara stared at him. You lived at -30. That was just outside. Inside it was perfectly comfortable. He almost smiled. We are very good at building inside. She thought about Duroth, about the way the wind came off the southern plateaus in the dry season and stripped heat out of anything it touched, how the young learned to find shelter before they learned to find food. We are very good at surviving outside, she said. Different approaches, Len said, same result. Not always the same result. He shrugged. No, not always, but here we both are. From under the conduit, Cole's voice came up through the floor. Len, I need the copper bridge connector from the red kit. 3rd pocket. Len found it and handed it down without looking. Cole's hand reached out from under the conduit, took it, and disappeared again. Priya came over, pulling off her outer gloves and tucking them into her belt. She had a data pad in one hand and an expression on her face that said she had been managing multiple problems at once and was about to hand one of them off. Zara, the Union Relay needs a crew manifest and incident report before they'll authorize the priority tug. Since you're the senior surviving officer, I'll need your sign-off. Of course, Zara took the pad. How long until the tug arrives? 6 hours if the relay approves priority, 12 if they process it standard. We will need life support for 12 hours on auxiliary. Cole says 8, he's building in margin. Zara looked at the data pad, then at Priya. You trust his estimate. I trust his margin more than I trust his estimate, Priya said. He always underestimates how long things take. His margins are usually right, though. Zara filed that away as a useful piece of information. She began filling out the incident report. The work was familiar, the kind of procedural task that came after disaster rather than during it, when the mind began to settle back into routine as a way of reasserting normalcy. She had done this before, after the Duroth mining collapse in her 2nd year, after the cargo transit incident near Hellion Station, after the reactor event on her first posting that had taken 2 of her crewmates and left her temporarily deaf in one ear. She was not new to aftermath, but she was new to sharing it with humans. How many rescue operations have you 3 run together? She asked Priya. Priya thought about it. Together, about 40. Cole and I have been working together for 8 years. Len joined the crew 3 years ago. 40 operations. Some were small, a few were, she paused, searching, complicated. Were any of them like this? Priya looked around at the scarred bay, the patched breach, the conduit work still in progress under Cole's hands. The physical situation, yes, similar, the outcome, she tilted her head. We haven't lost anyone we went in for, not yet. There was something in how she said not yet that told Zara this was not overconfidence. It was an honest reckoning with probability, held lightly, like a stone you carry without pretending it is not heavy. You said not yet, Zara observed, not that you won't. We are realistic people, Priya said. The universe is large and very indifferent, we know this. Zara set the data pad down for a moment. On Duroth we have a phrase, it does not translate perfectly, but the rough meaning is, do not ask the storm for mercy, learn its pattern and move. Priya was quiet for a moment. That's a good phrase. Your people have something similar. Lots of things similar. She picked up the data pad and handed it back. We have been adapting to difficult conditions since before we had language to describe them. It gets in the blood. She met Zara's eyes. You are not so different from us. I think you feel it. Zara did feel it. She had been feeling it since Cole had said, so do we, with that quiet matter-of-factness, and it had not stopped feeling significant. She finished the incident report and handed the pad back. Cole slid out from under the conduit, sat up, and pressed something on his wrist unit. Somewhere in the walls, a deep hum shifted tone, the auxiliary life support cycling up cleanly, without the rattling hesitation it had shown before. 8 hours, comfortable margin, he said, and looked at his hands. There was a dark streak across his right palm where something had discharged against it. He had not mentioned it. You were hit, Zara said. He glanced at his hand. Feedback from the secondary relay, not serious. It should be treated. It will be. He said it the way people say things when they mean after the work is done. Zara crossed to him, crouched, and looked at the burn without asking permission. It was a surface arc mark, roughly 3 centimeters, with secondary blistering along the edge. Painful, not dangerous, but painful. She reached into her own kit. She had grabbed it from her locker before the breach, a habit so ingrained it was automatic, and pulled out a Krethali burn compress. She applied it to his palm. He did not pull back, did not make a sound. This will cool the tissue and suppress the secondary inflammatory response, she said. Thank you, he said, watching her work the same way Len had watched her, with straightforward attention and no performance of stoicism. Just quiet acceptance. She tied off the compress and sat back. He flexed his fingers experimentally and nodded. Around them, the Solace run was broken and cold, and would never fly again. But the life support was running, the breach was sealed, the structure was stable, and the tug was coming. The universe had been indifferent, they had been less so. Zara sat down on the floor of the cargo bay, back against the wall, and for the first time since the crack of the breach, she breathed out fully. Cole sat beside her without asking, close enough to share warmth, which she suspected was partly practical and partly the kind of instinct that does not announce itself. Idaho, she said after a while. What about it? What is it like? He was quiet long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, cold in winter. The rivers run fast in spring. The mountains stay white at the top well into summer. There are animals that go into the ground for months and come out as if no time has passed. He paused. I used to think that was lazy. Now I think they understand something the rest of us don't. What do they understand? That survival is not always about fighting, he said. Sometimes it is about knowing when to be still. She thought about that. On Duroth, stillness was a hunting strategy, not a survival one, but the point was not entirely wrong. On Duroth, she said, we say that the planet teaches you what you are, not what you want to be, what you already are under everything else. What are you? Cole asked. She considered this seriously, the way the question deserved. Resilient, she said. And I am learning, perhaps less singular than I believed. He made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been the beginning of a laugh that chose not to finish. Priya called from across the bay. Tug relay confirms priority. 5 hours, 40 minutes. Cole tilted his head back against the wall. Close enough, he said. Zara did not argue. The tug was called the Barrow Reach, and it arrived 11 minutes ahead of schedule, which Priya announced with a tone that suggested this happened exactly as often as it did not. The pilot came through the docking tube first. A short, broad human woman named Dex who wore her hair cropped close and carried a manifest board like a weapon, tapping it against her opposite hand with the impatient rhythm of someone who measured time in units of things that still needed doing. You the senior officer? Dex asked Zara. I am. Any additional survivors we don't know about? No. Good, means my count matches. Dex made a note. We'll tow the ship to Velm Station. You'll need to give a deposition to the Union Incident Board within 72 hours. Cole already submitted the rescue log. He did, Zara glanced at Cole. He shrugged, easier to do it in real time. Memory gets fuzzy. It was such an understated thing to say, memory gets fuzzy, as if filing formal documentation during an ongoing rescue operation was simply good housekeeping. Zara filed this away alongside everything else she was collecting about how humans managed their relationship with chaos. They did not fight it. They did not flee it. They built systems around it. Small, practical, slightly tape-reinforced systems that worked because they had been tested by necessity rather than designed by theory. The transfer to the Barrow Reach took 40 minutes. Zara brought nothing except her kit and the broken beacon, which she had kept without deciding to. She was not sure why. She set it on the shelf above her assigned bunk in the tug's small passenger cabin, where it sat blinking its obsolete red signal into the dim light. Len appeared in the doorway. You should sleep if you can, he said. The deposition review will be long. I am aware, she looked at the beacon. Can I ask you something? Yes. When you came through the tube into that bay, did you calculate the risk before you entered? Formally, I mean. Did you run the numbers? Len was quiet for a moment. I have a sense of what a situation is likely to cost, he said carefully. I built that sense over time. When I go into something, I am not ignoring the numbers. I have already processed them. It is just. He searched for the word. Internalized. So you did calculate it. In the way that breathing is calculating the ratio of oxygen you need. You do not think about it step by step. You just do it correctly, because the wrong answer kills you and you have learned not to give the wrong answer. Zara understood this precisely. It was how she had been trained, not just taught but shaped, the way extreme environments shape the beings that survive them. The calculation was not performed in the moment. It was embedded in the body through years of consequence. You are well adapted, she said. Len smiled, a small one. We are a very old species that has spent most of its history in environments that did not want us, he said. We are still here, though. He tilted his head. As are you. He left her to rest, and she lay down on the bunk, which was slightly too short for her frame, which was fine, and stared at the ceiling of the Barrow Reach while the tug engaged its drive, and the distant view of Velm, 4 gas clouds began to move sideways across the porthole. She thought about the Galactic Union's classification system. Deathworlder, a being originating from an environment categorized as lethality class 4 or above, with physical adaptations that exceed the biological baseline for survivability in standard conditions. She had always read this as a clear category, a clean distinction. You were either built to survive things that should kill you, or you were not. But it turned out the humans came from a lethality class 3 world just below the threshold, and had simply refused to let that stop them. They had evolved their threshold through culture, through accumulated knowledge, through centuries of choosing to go into the hard places and come back with what they had learned. They had built the resilience into their history rather than their genetics. She was not sure anymore that genetics was the more impressive method. She reached up and turned the beacon off. The blinking red stopped. She slept. Velm Station was a waypoint hub, not a destination, and it carried the specific energy of a place that people moved through rather than stayed in. The corridors were wide and functional, the lighting adjusted to accommodate a dozen different species' visual ranges, and the smell of the air recyclers had the faint metallic sharpness common to stations built in this region of space. Zara had been here before, years ago, passing through on a cargo transfer that had taken 2 days longer than scheduled due to a union inspection dispute. She remembered it as unremarkable. It still was. The unremarkable quality of it was, right now, deeply reassuring. The deposition review was held in a union administrative suite on level 7, and it was exactly as long as Dex had predicted. Zara gave her account in precise sequence, answered every follow-up question with the same precision, and signed the final documentation without ceremony. The union investigator, a Gorathi male of senior rank, with the measured movements of someone who had seen many incident reports and expected all of them to be incomplete, reviewed Cole's rescue log alongside Zara's account and declared them consistent, which was apparently unusual enough to note. The rescue team's log is extremely detailed, the investigator said. They documented material conditions in real time throughout the operation. They are thorough, Zara said. The investigator made a sound that might have been agreement or might have been surprise. He thanked her and released her, and she walked out into the corridor and stood there for a moment, absorbing the ambient noise of the station. The movement of people, the hum of machinery, the distant echo of a cargo bay loading sequence, and felt the particular stillness of having finished something. Cole was leaning against the wall opposite the suite entrance, waiting. "You did not have to stay," she said. "I know," he straightened, "but I figured you might want someone to eat with." They found a place on level 4 that served a wide enough range of food to accommodate both of their biologies, which took a few minutes of negotiation with the menu system, which was perfectly fine. Priya and Len joined them late, having detoured to the station's parts market for supplies that Priya described as essential and Len described as optimistic. They sat in the kind of comfortable silence that forms between people who have been through something together and do not need to perform camaraderie. The food was adequate. The company was better than that. "What will you do now?" Priya asked Zara, not casually, with genuine interest. "I will file a full engineering report with my company," Zara said. "Then I will likely be reassigned. A new post, a new ship." She paused. "I have been doing this for 11 years. It is familiar." "Do you like it?" Len asked. She considered the question. "I am suited to it," she said, "which is not quite the same thing." Cole looked at her. "What would you do if you were not suited to it?" "I do not know," she said. "I have never asked myself." "You should," he said simply, not as a directive, just a statement, the way he seemed to say most things without pressure or performance. Doing what you are suited for keeps you alive. Doing what you want from it keeps you interested. "What do you want from it?" she asked him. He thought about this with the honest seriousness the question deserved. "To be useful," he said, "to go into the hard place and come back having done something that mattered. The rest changes." He glanced at Priya and Len. "The people make the difference." Priya was eating something that smelled deeply unpleasant to Zara's olfactory range, and did not seem to notice or care. Len was reviewing the parts manifest on his data pad, making small notes. They were, she realized, exactly as they had been in the cargo bay, engaged in the work of living without spectacle, without announcement, just present. She thought about the beacon on the shelf in the tug's passenger cabin, which she had left there without thinking. She would go back for it, not because she needed it, but because it was hers and it had marked something. "I have a question," she said. "Ask," Cole said. "Your species does not classify yourselves as Deathworlders. The Union does not classify Earth above lethality class 3, but you survive things that..." She chose her words. That lethality class 3 should not produce survivability for. That is not a question yet, Priya said. The question is, do you think the classification is wrong, or do you think you are something the classification does not account for? The table was quiet for a moment. Both, Len said. The classification system was built before humans were included in it. It measures environmental conditions, not what an organism does with those conditions over time. We had about 300,000 years of doing things with our conditions before anyone from outside was paying attention. He set down his data pad. We are well described by the environment we came from. We are not fully described by it. Nothing alive is, Priya said. Cole was looking at Zara with that steady gray-green attention. Why are you asking? She thought about it honestly. Because I believed I was the only Deathworlder aboard the Solace run, she said. I had a certain understanding of what that meant about me and about everyone else, and now I am not sure the understanding was complete. Was it wrong? He asked. No, she said, but it was, smaller than the truth. He nodded slowly. That happens. The categories we use to understand where we fit, they help, but they also have edges, and at the edges things get more interesting. More interesting, she repeated. Isn't that usually where the truth is? He said. She could not argue with that. The meal wound down the way good ones do, not abruptly, but gradually like a tide going out, with the conversation growing comfortable and spacious rather than forced. Priya recounted a rescue operation from 4 years ago that had involved a malfunctioning atmospheric processor and a Gorathi mining crew who had refused to evacuate on cultural grounds. Len had a story about the Antarctic research station that involved a collapsed ice shelf, a sled, and a very particular sequence of decisions that he told in a way that made it sound almost reasonable. Cole said almost nothing, but listened the way people do when they are genuinely interested in what is being said. Zara told them about the mining collapse on Duroth. She did not usually tell this story. It was not that it was private exactly. It was that most people she encountered did not have the frame of reference to understand it, the particular character of disaster in a place where disaster is simply the background frequency of existence. But these three listened with complete attention, and when she described the moment she had held a structural beam in place for 40 minutes while her crewmates evacuated through the tunnel below her, the quality of their silence told her they understood not just the physical fact of it but the specific weight of that choice. Did you know you could hold it that long? Priya asked. No, Zara said, I found out. Cole raised his cup slightly, not a toast exactly, just an acknowledgement. She raised hers. 2 days after the deposition, Zara received her reassignment orders. A new ship, the Kedril Run, out of Velm Station, departing in 5 days. Engineering lead, full rank. The ship was a newer model than the Solace Run, with updated hull composites and a better-rated atmospheric management system. She accepted the post, filed the confirmation, and walked down to the station's lower observation deck, which curved out over the docking bays in a wide arc of reinforced transparent material, offering a clean view of the ships below and the space beyond them. She went there because she wanted to think, and because she found that open space, even transparent, simulated open space behind 3 centimeters of composite glass, helped her think. She was standing there when Cole appeared beside her. She had not heard him coming, which was unusual. She said so. You were thinking loudly, he said. It distracted from the footsteps. She turned to look at him. You are leaving today. In 2 hours, we have a recovery job near Hessel Point. He stood beside her, looking at the docking bays. It will involve a lot of very cold temperatures and at least one piece of equipment that nobody has bothered to maintain properly. You are looking forward to it. Always, he said without irony. She looked back out at the ships. The Barrow Reach was 3 bays over, its hull marked with the kind of honest where that comes from regular hard use. It looked exactly like what it was, A working vessel operated by people who used tools until they stopped working, and then fixed them until they worked again. I have been thinking about what you said, she told him, about the categories and their edges. What about it? I have spent 11 years understanding my value in terms of what my species biology gives me. The strength, the pain threshold, the endurance. I came to see it as what set me apart. She paused. I still think those things matter. They do, he said. But I think I was using them as a way of not looking at what I share, she said. With people who are not Krethali, with people who are very different from me, I was focusing on the distinction instead of, she searched, instead of the convergence. The convergence, he repeated. You evolved in cold mountains. I evolved on an acid plane under a binary sun, different paths, different mechanisms. She looked at him. But we arrived at the same place. We kept moving through things that should have stopped us. We learned to work with what we had. We built the margin. She paused. The convergence. Cole was quiet for a moment. You know what that means if you follow it out. What does it mean? It means neither of us is as alone as we thought we were. He glanced at her sideways. That could be a problem for someone who got comfortable being the only one in the room. She considered this. It could, she said, or it could be the more interesting option. He almost smiled, not quite but close. There you go. The docking bay below them was active now, ships moving in and out with the steady rhythm of a place that did not pause for anyone. She watched a freighter the size of the Solace run clear its docking clamps and angle toward the departure lane, moving with the unhurried confidence of a ship that expected to arrive. When you come back from Hessel Point, she said, the Kedril run will be departing from this station. Our routes may cross. Space is large, he said. It is, she agreed, but it turns out it is less large than I thought. He looked at her then, and something in his expression shifted, not to warmth exactly, but to something adjacent to it, the quiet kind of recognition that does not need to announce itself. Take care of your crew, he said. Give them a leader who does not think she has to do it all alone. That is a very pointed piece of advice. I know. She turned to face him fully. You also do not do it alone, I noticed. I noticed you noticing. They stood for another moment in the light of the observation deck, two beings from very different worlds who had both learned, through different means, at different costs, that the universe was hard and did not care, and who had both chosen, separately and then together for a small number of hours, to make it otherwise anyway. Safe routes, she said. And for you, he said. Then he turned and walked back toward the interior of the station, unhurried, the way someone walks when they know where they are going. She stood at the observation window and watched the Barrow reach, 2 hours later, right on time, pull out of its bay and accelerate toward the departure lane. It moved without ceremony, without drama, just a ship going somewhere it needed to be, crewed by people who would do what was needed when they arrived. She watched until it was small, then smaller, then gone. The stars did not care about any of this. They burned and they did not notice. She noticed, though. She was very good at noticing. 11 years of hard experience had made her that way, and she was no longer sure the experience belonged entirely to her biology or her species or the planet that had shaped her. Some of it, maybe more than she had previously accounted for, belonged to the simple fact of continuing, of choosing, every time the choice came, to find out how much longer you could hold. She had found out, once again, in a broken cargo bay under a poisonous sky. It turned out the answer was, longer than you think. She took the elevator back up to level 7, collected the beacon from the tug's passenger cabin. The attendant looked at it with polite confusion, and she did not explain and carried it with her to the Kedril run's berth, where she introduced herself to her new crew, walked the engineering sections, noted 3 maintenance items that needed attention, and got to work. The beacon sat on her desk in the engineering office. She never turned it back on. She did not need to. She knew now where the signal pointed. not outward into empty space, waiting for someone to come. Forward, always forward, into whatever was next. That, she understood at last, was the thing she had always shared with them, with Cole and Priya and Len, and the Barrow Reach, and every being who had ever looked at a thing that should stop you and simply decided to keep moving. It was not a Krethali thing, she thought, with something that felt like wonder settling quietly into her chest. It was older than that. It was a living thing. And it was enough.